Here's a guy who will supposedly answer the hard atheist questions.
Brother Adnan Rashid, welcome to our cross-questioning concept. In this concept, we are going to ask some tough questions that are asked by the atheists. When you're ready, we can start.
I'm ready.
What is the need for religions and prophets?
The need for religions and prophets is to guide people. If people don't have guidance, if you don't have a roadmap to live a life, how are you going to live a life?
However I feel like living my life. That's how I live my life. It's awesome. I recommend it.
Everyone will be doing everything.
That's clearly not true. I don't have a religion and I don't do everything. Why would everyone do everything? It seems more intuitive to me that people would primarily do what they feel like doing.
So that's why there have to be limits, there have to be regulations, there have to be directions in order to reach our destinations.
Well, that depends on what our destinations are. I have reached many of the destinations at which I have aimed, and I have done so without being religious.
So we have purpose in life. And that purpose is clarified, defined by religion and prophets. Prophets bring the religion as a roadmap.
But why ought I fulfill the purpose that religion and prophets tell me to? Why ought I follow that roadmap? Even if it's the case that there need to be limits on behavior, why should they be religious limits? Why would I prefer religious limits to any other kind of limit? Why would I prefer religious purposes over a purpose I decide for myself? Why do I even need a purpose? Can I not enjoy drifting aimlessly?
So prophets are guides. They are guides and religion is the roadmap. So we follow the roadmap to reach our destination, which is success in this life and the hereafter.
How exactly do you define success? Has there never been a devout Muslim who ever failed at anything? If there has, then following a religious plan doesn't guarantee success in that regard, does it? Or do you define success as simply succeeding to obey your religion, making the assertion that obeying religion leads to success meaninglessly tautological?
Can't we understand it on our own?
Can you leave a child in the middle of the road and ask him to find his home? Or if you leave a man in the middle of the desert, somewhere in a huge desert, can that person find his own way without any compass in his hand? No.
This assumes that life is like being a perpetual child, or like being lost in a desert. Coming up with goals and achieving them is not always that complicated or difficult.
So to find a way, you have to have direction. You have to follow stars. You have to follow footsteps. You have to follow those paths people have already walked on.
Those things are helpful, but you can find your own path too. It's difficult, but definitely possible. If finding success without religious prophets were impossible, then no person who is not religious could ever have achieved anything that nobody else achieved.
So that's why directions and instructions are absolutely crucial for one to find way. So that just like you cannot leave a man in the middle of the desert without any directions and expect him to find his way, just like that, every human needs directions in life to be successful, spiritually as well as physically.
Can't the purpose of life be found without having a prophet?
It would be impossible to do that because, first of all, how would a person define the purpose of life without a prophet coming from God telling you what the purpose of life is?
By making a purpose up. Why don't we follow God's purpose for our lives?
Because in that case, the purpose of life would be different from man to man, from person to person, from city to city, from culture to culture, from time to time, right? So you wouldn't have one purpose of life, you would have 1 billion purposes of life.
1 billion different purposes for life sounds awesome. What's the problem?
That's why God, who created us, sends the prophets to tell us the ultimate purpose of life, which is to worship God, to make this world a better place.
Why is worshiping God a purpose that I ought to follow? And by what standard am I to judge whether something does or does not make the world a better place? God's? Why should I care about what God thinks is better?
And the only way to do that is to follow your creator. Just like when a manufacturer makes a car, they send you a booklet, right? And they tell you what the purpose of this car is and how to drive it. So our creator, who has made us, who has made this universe, knows best what we need to do and how we need to live. And that's why purpose of life comes from the maker.
Why does the fact that God is the creator, if that even is a fact, mean that his plan is the best? Who says it's best? God? That seems pretty circular to me. I don't see how there is any ultimate non-circular argument for why we ought to obey God's plan instead of any other plan. Even with respect to the manual that comes with a car, whether you ought to do what the manual says depends on why you bought the car in the first place. If you bought the car to drive it, then following the manual is probably helpful. But if you bought the car to feed it to Truckosaurus because that shit is awesome, then you can safely set the manual aside.
If there is a maker, and there is a maker, then he's the one we follow, and his instructions are more important than anyone else's.
Why?
Why did God allow other religions to be corrupted?
God allowed other religions to be corrupted because they were not for eternity. They were not for all of humanity. They were sent for specific people in specific times. And if those religions were not changed, then those people would continue to follow them as the truth, or as the ultimate truth, or as the truth for eternity. But that wasn't the case. They were not meant to be forever. They were not meant to be the final message to humanity. So for example, when the messengers came to Israelites, they came to those villages, to those people, for those times. So messengers were sent to every town, every city, let's say, or to every people to do a specific job. When the job was done, the message was kind of removed, right? Cancelled.
If different religious messages were necessary for different times and places, why is that not still the case? Why did God cease being a cultural relativist all of a sudden? If different messages were appropriate for different times and cultures, then are you conceding that one singular plan is not always best for everyone at all times? You at least seem to be conceding that this used to be the case. What changed? Why is this suddenly no longer the case?
Right, because a new message would come afterwards. So when new message was coming, what's the point of keeping the old message? So it was, in my opinion, a deliberate method of God telling humanity that this is not for everyone. This is not for all of you. This is for those people for that time, and there is something new coming in the future.
Couldn't a single religion come from the beginning?
There was never more than one religion.
Well, you just said that there was more than one religious message. Why couldn't one single religious message come from the beginning? Why did the ultimate message have to wait until Muhammad came along?
Never. There was always one religion for a people who were confined by the sea, by land, by challenges, by dangers around them. So in the past, people were not traveling around the world as we are today, right? They were very limited by their geography. So when a message came to them, it was only one message to them. Okay?
So one religion can have multiple messages for different people in different contexts? If that's the case, then how can you tell the difference between different messages for different contexts and entirely different religions? How do you draw that distinction?
The Quran is unique. The Quran came at a time when the world had become very dynamic. People, especially in the Middle East, they got to know each other. The Christians and the Jews and the Arabs knew each other quite well, right? So the Quran came for all of them. That's why the Quran spoke to the Christians directly. The Quran spoke to the Jewish people directly. The Quran spoke to the idol worshippers directly. So the Quran amazingly speaking to all people. The Quran came for humanity. The Quran came for An-Nas. An-Nas means people.
So why didn't the Quran, which was supposedly for all people, come first? What was the difference between the time that the Quran came and any previous time? Why did previous times require bespoke prophecies, but the time at which the Quran came was the right time for a one-size-fits-all prophecy? Sure, the Christians, Jews, and some of what you call idol worshippers were in contact with one another, but this was the 7th century, a time when there were still several continents full of people who hadn't yet been in any contact at all with the Christians and Jews. So why was that time so special?
How do you know that the Quran has not changed?
Good question. We know that because we have copies from the time of the Prophet's companions. Those people who learnt the Quran directly from the Prophet himself wrote copies of the Quran. Those copies are still available today to us.
The original Quran is what the angel Gabriel supposedly said to Muhammad. Muhammad didn't write that down himself. Even if the folks who eventually wrote the Quran down were consistent with each other, how can we be sure that what they were writing is consistent with what Muhammad told them, or that what Muhammad told them is consistent with what Gabriel told Muhammad? To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.